I 3D printed a Pip-Boy. But that's the easy part. Bringing it to life, that's the tricky bit. And then I remembered these. This is either genius or a really dumb idea.
Not a massive success.
I still can't get this phone to fit in. I am so pleased with how this has turned out. Maybe it needs to be in the dark. I think that's pretty good. My plan is to use a phone screen as a way to bring the screen of the Pip-Boy to life. Some of them are very broken. And this is something that I have actually done before, way back when I was making a spaceship in my garage as a way to bring different panels to life. And in fact, this is exactly how they bring the screens to life in the actual TV show. But the challenge is going to be fitting them inside here in a way that works. So these ones, I think, the old SEs are probably too small, which means that this one, which is very broken, actually looks like it's about the right size. And I want it to be that big because this little dial and this dial here can both be lit using the screen. But right now, as you can see, it's way too far away from the front here. So I'm going to need to do some messing around in here to make it fit. And so, with reckless abandon, I grabbed a soldering iron and started to make more space in my 3D print. So, after spending a lot of time with the soldering iron making a mess of this part and poking holes in the top of it, I still can't get this phone to fit in because one of the big challenges I totally forgot about is the fact that when this closes, there's a bend here. Yeah, it's whatever goes in here has to fit snugly in here. Rather than messing around and pulling this to pieces, I think I need to go back to the computer and see if I can make a better job of this. So I opened the 3D model in Tinkercad, identified the areas that were a problem, and created a 3D replica of my phone that I was able to use as a cutout. This created a new space within the model to fit in my phone. I did, however, have to plug a few holes that appeared. I sent this new model to print, removed the support, and tested to see if anything I'd done really worked.
But this fit, yes, look at that.
I did it! First time, it's always pretty satisfying when you measure something, you model it, and then it works.
The phone is in there. I am really deeply happy with that.
But there isn't much time to sit around and enjoy my victory, because I have to move on to the next step, which is building a screen to go in here. But Matt, there's a screen in there, I hear you say. Yes, there is. That screen, that broken phone that's in there, is merely to create content inside the device. I need to recreate that CRT old-fashioned screen look. And to do that, I'm going to have to do a little bit of work. Old-fashioned CRT screens had a very distinctive bulbous shape, unlike the perfectly flat screens of today. In order to create this shape that you see on the Pip-Boy, I'm going to need to build some kind of transparent lens to sit in front of the mobile phone screen. And to do this, I'm going to use a bit of vacuforming. The first thing that we need to do if we're going to use vacuforming is create what we call a tool, which is the shape that you're going to use to form the vacuum material over. And in order to do that, I'm going to use my original 3D print with the modifications I made and some air drying clay. Because what I'm going to try and do is literally sculpt that shape of the screen so that I can use a vacuforming technique to bring this whole thing together. Okay, well, there it is, my little tiny clay sculpture. It's air drying clay, so now I just need to leave it in the air. So, my clay sculpt is now dry, and that means it's time to start vacuforming. The only challenge is I don't actually have a vacuform machine, but that's okay because I'm pretty sure I understand how they work, and I'm pretty sure that I can make one from stuff I just got here in my workshop. So, let's give it a try. I start by measuring how large my vacuform tool needs to be. I then cut some pieces of wood to create a frame that will hold the plastic that gets pushed down on the vacuform. Then I cut all the other pieces of wood I need to create the vacuform platform. Now I have everything I need, it's time to put everything together. I'm using hot glue here for speed and to create a bit of a seal between all of the parts. And then nailing everything together to stabilize the structure. Now the box is completed, I drill a matrix of holes that will ultimately create the vacuum to pull the heated plastic onto the mold. I drill a big hole, plug in my shop vac, and get a pretty impressive amount of suction. So with the box and the frame now complete, I need to cut some plastic to fit inside of this frame. And I'm going to use this plastic here, transparent PLA plastic, and I'm going to cut it down to fit on the frame. But how am I going to heat it? Well, in the absence of a clever vacuform machine, I'm just going to use a heat gun.
Not a massive success on our first attempt here.
The plastic turned opaque and it did not pull a very good form. You can see that there, it's pretty poor. I'm going to try again, and I probably need to heat the plastic for a slightly shorter time, and I probably need to try moving it onto the vacuform quicker.
23. Oh my gosh, I think it worked. There we go. Oh. Now look, it has started to go a little bit on that side, but that is by far the best one yet.
Not to be defeated by overheating the plastic, I tried one more time, heating it for 10 less seconds.
Okay, that is the best one yet. There is still a slightly kind of rumpled look to it.
I'm still pretty happy with that though. I think considering I scrounged this rig together from stuff I just had knocking around in the workshop, I think that's pretty good. However, on closer inspection, I started to wonder if it was the shape of the form I'd created that was causing these imperfections. And so I decided to do a little bit of sanding. Having finished dry sanding, I added a little bit of moisture and did a final wet sand with a lower grit of sandpaper.
Okay, I think that looks better. If you compare it to this one, look at the difference. That is definitely more mottled and warped looking. Okay, oh yeah, look, so much better.
So all I needed to do now was cut the form out and put it inside my 3D model. Okay, I'm so pleased with how this has turned out. Took a little bit of effort, that sanding, and then using a little bit of water made it so much smoother. Considering this is the very, very first time I've ever done any kind of vacuforming, and also starting with transparent vacuforming, which is, as I found out, harder than regular vacuforming, I am super pleased. Super pleased with that. But wait, Matt, what's that weird red stuff over your 3D model? Well, that's the next step. In order to get rid of the layer lines that you see on the 3D model, we take some acetone and some Bondo glazing putty and mix them together to create a weird kind of brown slurry. This then gets painted onto the model and fills small layer lines, so it makes sanding and spraying the model much easier in the long run. After the slurry is fully dry, we give all of the models a good sanding to make the surface as smooth as possible, using whatever tools are most appropriate. We then wipe away all of the dust, make sure everything's thoroughly dry, and then coat everything with a filler primer. Once everything's dry, I clean up the paint job, especially focusing on areas where the paint may have lost some of the detail of the model. Resand where needed, and then re-clean. I then spray the model with some adhesion promoter, let it dry, and finish the whole thing in this metallic spray paint.
Alright, everything's been sprayed. It's in my spray booth.
And once all those horrible fumes are pulled off, I'll take it out and put it in a very dry environment and let the whole thing dry for at least 24 hours, because that metallic paint really needs a lot of time to dry and be good enough for me to do the next step. So now everything's dried and looking suitably silver, it's time to put this whole thing together. So now I've got my hinge, I need to figure out how I'm going to hold this onto that. And to do this, I'm going to use the holes that have already been created as part of the 3D model to put small magnets in, so I can just clip that onto the surface. The one challenge with that is that the holes that are currently in the 3D model are definitely not going to hold those magnets. So I'm going to use a couple of techniques to get those magnets flush so they sit perfectly in the model. To do this, I'm simply taking a hot soldering iron and pushing a hot magnet into the hole to create the right shape and depth. Then I remove the magnets and mix up some 5-minute epoxy. I dot it into the holes and then push my magnets into place. And repeat this process with the other half of the model. It's worth noting as part of this process, if you try and copy it yourself, that the magnets that you use to heat up and push into the plastic, they can't be used afterwards because the excessive heat destroys the magnetism in them. So I'm reusing the same set of magnets to create the holes each time, and then I'm going to discard them after this. To make this part easier, I've already stuck the receiving magnets onto the other half of the model. When I push the parts together, these magnets go into the holes and stick to the epoxy. Alright, it's all together, the buttons are in place, and now it's time to do, well, a little bit of weathering on this before I put the screen in and the dials. To do this, I'm using some basic acrylic paints and a dry brushing technique where I dab the paint on and then use a cloth to pull it off again. This means the paint stays in the places I want it, I can pull it off the places I don't. I then repeat the process with the second colour, a slightly darker brown, and finally with a black. My aim here is to give this prop a weathered and aged look, showing that it's been used in the wasteland for over 200 years. I use a thin brush and black acrylic paint to darken up any joints or creases that I want to be particularly grimy. I then stick our vacuform screen in with some hot glue and add an extra layer of grime around its edges. So now the screen is in and looking awesome, it's time to create some digital content to go on my Pip-Boy. And to do that, I need to head to the editing suite. There are actually a bunch of really good video resources out there on YouTube, people that have captured screens from the game and built screens from other places, and I'll put some links to some of that content in the details below. So once I've grabbed the screens that I need, I then put it into the edit suite and pull it all together. And one of the key things I need to make sure I can do is have that video last a reasonable amount of time, because what I don't want to do is keep taking the phone out of the Pip-Boy and putting it back in again. So I'm creating something that's about 10 minutes long that will show some key screens and also will bring the Pip-Boy to life with sound effects. Okay, I put the phone back in. Look how great it's looking. I am so pleased with how this has come out. But there's just one little detail that I've got to finish. And that's the dials here at the side. There's nothing in them right now. And so I need to do something about that. So I jumped into Photoshop, grabbed a couple of images of the dials, made sure they were the right size, and printed them on some bright white paper. To ensure that light can pass up from the screen into the dial, I printed a filler from transparent material, which will sit underneath the paper cutout of the dial. I push the wedge in, make sure it's recessed at least 2/8 of an inch, and then I cut a piece of the same PLA transparent material to go in front of it to make it look like a shiny dial surface. This helps the whole thing to look more realistic and not just like a piece of paper. Again, I cut some transparent material for the other dial and position and tape the dial behind it. All that's left to do now is add a bit of weathering around the sides with a small brush in black and brown. And then when it's dry enough, I use a skewer to scrape some of the paint off to make it look more realistic. Okay, so now that's successfully done, I need to create a light source in order for these dials to light up. And that's actually going to be pretty simple. I'm going to go into the video I originally created and add a yellow area which creates a glow where the dials will be. Okay, I've downloaded the updated version of the video onto the phone. Now it's time to see if it looks the way I hope it's going to look and whether it lights up those dials.
Oh, there it is. The only issue I'm seeing is, look, you can see that part of the screen there. I can't see any light being carried up there at all.
Maybe it needs to be in the dark. Okay, I've taken it into a darker area and you definitely can see that the dials are lighting up here, which is great. So I just need to block off that piece so you can't see the light shining between the screen and the side.
This, I've just realized.
Putting the turning button in here has added a little bit of a bump on there, and that is stopping the phone from going down. Yeah, I'm gonna have to play with that. That's a pain, but that's probably part of the reason why the phone is not as close as it should be. So I used a soldering iron to melt the inside of the button, and then I used a piece of foam to create a small blocker to make sure that the light source for the dials wouldn't be visible from the screen.
Well, I managed to successfully block it off.
But the issue is that the light source I've created on the video is too far over, so I need to re-render my video again. So back to the edit suite. I deleted the original light source and created a new one closer to the edge of the screen. Yes! It works. You can't see the light anymore. It's very bright in here because I've got studio lighting on, but it's turned out fantastic. So now I've done that part, it's really just down to putting everything together and doing the final touches. The hole I'm drilling here is for the wire that's going to connect the adapter plug, and instead of using a flexible wire, I'm using a solid core one because I'm going to use the adapter plug as a kind of stand. The wire will level out the uneven base of the Pip-Boy and allow me to present it with the adapter plug on display. In order to make the Pip-Boy really shine and look like real metal, I'm going to use this chrome pen to bring out the high points to show the real metal coming through the grime. couldn't be more pleased with how this came out. The screen itself, the mobile phone as the source of content for this, and the weathering and general look of the whole thing. I'm super happy and very excited to be able to put this on display in my workshop. And as I know that you love making things like this, you're going to want to check out one of these 2 videos that will take you to more cool content, just like this video about building things, weathering things, and creating cool props. Just click one of these.